I'm going to make another video here on market defense, and rather than try and lay it all out, I'm going to object to and contradict one of the basic premises that everyone else seems to be accepting the idea that defense services are non-excludable. And I beg to differ. I think that they are excludable. Most of them are, enough of them to make a difference between whether you pay or you don't. Now, I think the best example here is the idea of gun ownership. It's well understood that when the rate of gun ownership increases, crime, especially certain types of crime, lowers. Criminals don't know who has the guns, and so they curtail their activity because they don't want to mug you. They think you might have a gun. They don't want to break into your house, especially because they think you might have a gun and you might shoot them, even if you don't have a gun. So you can be a non-gun owner, and you do derive some benefit from the fact that your area has a lot of gun ownership. However, that doesn't mean that owning a gun confers no benefit. If somebody's actually breaking down your door in the middle of the night, the fact that there's a high rate of gun ownership in your area doesn't do anything, or probably won't. You need a gun yourself. That gun, even though it's expensive, conveys a greater level of security and more options in the event that you need it than the fact that the populace around you may own guns. And like where I live, gun ownership is pretty high. On the national average is about 1 in 2. About 50% of the households have guns in them. There aren't statistics specific to my area, but I'm going to estimate that it's probably more than 75%. And yet, I still own guns. You know, if I get mugged, it doesn't matter that my neighbors have guns. So, I've spent a lot of money over the years arming myself. Some of you will appreciate this one came with an orange tag that said "not legal in California." In my opinion, was a selling point. That's not all my guns, that's just some of them. And guns aren't the only things I have for my own protection. But what I just showed you there is easily $3,000 worth of guns, probably more, because I got those before Obama was elected, and all three of those went up in price after he got elected. It's just an example now that the fact that others may do something that might convey some benefit on you doesn't mean that there's no incentive for you to do it. People have this imagery of defense as being like a heavenly shield or something that defends everybody, but really that's not the case. Whenever there's a war, whenever there's an invading army, this includes when there's a state protecting the people, which we should never forget. The state is always protecting itself, and if it just happens to protect people, that's an ancillary benefit. That's not the case. People in countries that are invaded or they're likely to be invaded, they're always thinking, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my house? What's going to happen to my family? And they take whatever precautions they can. Now, legally, usually they're prohibited from owning arms of any type, and they're almost certainly prohibited from organizing a military of their own to protect themselves or those around them. But even so, they will do things like store food, build bomb shelters. If they have relatives who live in a place that they figure is safer, they will try and get there. They might take to the hills or to the woods or to the sea or whatever. I mean, none of them say, oh, there's this army that exists, it provides protection. The best thing I can do is just keep paying taxes to it. That never happens. People always do what they think is necessary to protect themselves. That's what the whole thing with refugees is. You know, refugees kind of go with war hand in hand. Those are people who have decided that the heavenly shield of the state is insufficient protection, and they take action personally. Now, there's any number of totally excludable services that we can talk about. One, of course, is the gun ownership, but there are organizational ones as well. I've mentioned it before. We could build bomb shelters. They could say, hey, if you haven't paid for the bomb shelter, you don't get to come into it. There could be, as others have mentioned, insurance for any damage. Now, Fringe Elements pointed out that's not actually defense. He's correct, but it could go in conjunction with defense. And I think one of the big things I haven't heard mentioned yet is people could join basically what you might call armies, but these are voluntary organizations like conquistadors, but they're defense organizations, and they don't provide universal protection. What they say, you join us, if you join this military, this militia, this defense co-op, whatever you want to call it, could take many forms, you will have the advantage of being able to coordinate with the rest of us. They probably sign some waiver, some understanding saying, okay, listen, we have to coordinate our actions if we're attacked. So we may not be able to defend your house, but here's what we'll do. We'll have depots or bomb shelters or hidden locations where you can put your valuables, and we'll also do war insurance so that if worse comes to worse, you are damaged, we'll pay for that. And they also will say, hey, but most of our members are in this area, so we will concentrate on defending this area. The other thing is they'll say, if you're in this organization, we will logistically support you. Most notably, we will keep you fed. The fact that we have 500, 1,000 guys taking up arms in an organized fashion means that we will be able to secure food and shelter, and if there ever is an attack or some kind of assault, not only will we be able to resist to some degree, we will be able to keep you alive. Now, this is something that they can exclude people. If someone else shows up and says, hey, please help us, we're starving, we didn't prepare, we're all alone, they can say, sorry, to be in this organization you had to have been a member at least a year, maybe gone to the 3 weekends a month, or whatever. They might say, well, you can join, here's the premium, you got to pay us this much more, and you got to be I mean, it's totally excludable. And actually, if you look historically, it's very common for people to join what we call them gangs or warlords or something like that. But it's, people will cooperate for their own defense, and they do so in a way that is totally excludable. I've since 2008, I've been kind of outspoken, anti-government, predicting the end is nigh. I'm not a religious apocalyptic person, but since 2008, every once in a while I'll get calls from people saying, hey, and a lot of my friends from high school actually called and said, we should get together and buy a farm in some rural area, which is easy. There's plenty of rural areas around here that are very arable and nice for farming. And we should cooperate for our own defense. Now, this is in a period where ostensibly the state exists to do that. But they still are worried about their own well-being, and they realize that there's only so much you can do on your own. You can do a lot on your own, but there's only so much. And it would be better if, say, a dozen buddies, lived in some kind of compound or whatever, and were prepared to defend it. And a dozen guys defending their own turf, it can go a long way. Now, one objection I hear a lot is I'll say, my militia, my house, me and my guns, and the objection will be, that's tiny in comparison to an army. Well, there's two problems with that. One is no entire army is ever going to be brought to bear on just you. It's physically impossible. That it's only going to be some unit of an army, and likely not outnumber you that much. The other problem with that is it's zooming in to say me and my 20 neighbors and saying, oh look how few resources you have. Compare that to the entire army. Of course, the entire army of the United States is supported by 300 million people. So you're looking at the resources of 20, and then you're saying, oh, that doesn't compare to the resources of 300 million. Yeah, but you have to take into account if we had a stateless society, it wouldn't just be out of the 300 million people, me and my 20 neighbors who would be taking precautions, it would be, I don't think it would be everybody, but it would be a lot of people. I don't think everybody needs to do it, by the way. That's why I say that. If you live in an area that has almost zero chance of being attacked, or is super defensible, or you don't care about being occupied, if you're ambivalent about being conquered, then there's no reason for you to pay or take any precautions towards defense. And I don't see that as a problem. Anyway, this idea that it's totally unfair to say, okay, you 20 don't have the same resources as a state that rules 300 million. The real theoretical test here, though, would be, okay, what if the 20 of us formed a state? What would be the resource, if we had 20 people and said, we're going to form a state, would we be able to field the army you're talking about? No. There wouldn't be any difference between, if the 20 of us said, hey, we'll each have guns and we'll form a militia and then be non-state, and then we said, no, let's have the 20 of us form a state, is there going to be a big difference in what we can do defensively? I would argue not. And it's disingenuous and intellectual sloth to, and they do this a lot. I mean, one thing that you just notice since we live in the United States is a lot of people basically set it up in such a way that anything less than what the United States currently has is indefensible, which is absurd because no country in the entire world today, save the United States, has anything like the United States. So by that logic, every other country in the world is completely helpless and indefensible, and that's absurd. That's not the case at all. The United States is afraid to invade many countries. Many people in the military say we couldn't possibly get in a war with Iran, which is a poor area, small country. Defense is an excludable good commodity. Nobody thinks in terms of, oh, is there an umbrella to protect everybody? There is no such umbrella. Everybody's concerned about their life, their house, and what can they do to protect those things. And the state is not an answer to that, because the state does not have, say it's me and my 20 guys in my neighborhood, and say it's right now in the United States, and we take measures to protect ourselves. I can guarantee that the Pentagon does not have a plan about how to protect, the hill I live on. I guarantee they never thought about it, they never will, and if there was ever a situation where we were about to be attacked, they wouldn't give a shit. Alright? Like I said, their number one priority is the preservation and protection of the state. And that's what they plan for. I even saw on the news, Diane Sawyer just went on the Doomsday plane. It's a 707 that's been, retrofitted to withstand a nuclear blast. And she literally says, this is for the powerful. The rest of us can just fucking die. She didn't say that part, but this is for the powerful. This isn't for you and me. It exists for the powerful. It's their ticket out. Those bomb shelters are for them. The lead-lined costumes are for them. Of course, you can get those yourself. Every time I go to the dentist, I'm like, I need to get one of those. I need to get a couple of those and make a lead-lined, radiation suit. And if I do that, then that radiation suit will benefit me and not my neighbors. It might benefit them a little bit, because if I can survive, maybe I can help them a little bit, but I get the most benefit from that. And so there is still an incentive to do it, just like there's an incentive for me to fucking go and buy a gun and learn how to use it and get ammo for it, or a bow, or take taekwondo or whatever. Defense is totally excludable. So I think that that's a non sequitur, and I think that rather than accept that premise that, oh, it's this good that can't be separated, we should realize that most certainly can.